Give that a try. Hey everybody, it's Mike Nash again from Impact to Hero. We are in our Post-Traumatic Growth Library studios, and I am here with my good friend Luz Cervantes, who is a Navy veteran and is going to be inducted in our 2019 Impact to Hero Hall of Fame. And she is here to tell a little bit about her story with us. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Mike. It's always a pleasure to see you, and I'm honored to be part of your 2019 Gala or Gala. My daughter says I'm Southern, so I say Gala. Some people call it Gala, but hey, you know, tomato, tomato, right?
I've always called it Gala, but I feel people almost kind of correct me. It's a gala. It's a gala. But I'm excited. They're a lot of fun. This year's going to be extra special, and I'm excited to hear your story. But one of the things we're going to do today is share with some of our audience about your story. So not everybody's going to be able to make it to the gala. But they would love to hear your story. So,
sure.
I know that you served in the Navy, and
did.
Can you tell us a little bit about why you chose to serve and why you chose the Navy and what your experience was like?
I was born in Mexico, and I migrated here when I was 2 years old. Going back during the summertime, I saw how my cousins lived, and I felt so appreciative of everything that I had here. And I was class president, honor student, and everybody thought I was automatically going to go get these scholarships and go to college, but my mind was set on traveling the world, and the best way to do that was through the Navy.
Absolutely.
Ironically, I got lucky and I got stationed in Pensacola, Florida, so I didn't get to do as much traveling as I would have liked, but I still enjoyed my service. I met people that I'm still friends with today, 20 years later, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
Very cool. But you joined to travel, and you didn't get to go too far. What were your when did you join?
I joined in '96. I joined in '96, graduated in June, and by August I was already in boot camp.
Yeah, very cool. What'd you do in the Navy?
Aviation support equipment technician. I'd actually signed up without a job. The recruiter, you know, in all his honesty, says, well, you know, if you can't decide what you want to do, there's a great program for you where you go and you get to see what everybody else is doing, and then you decide what you want to do. Sign me up for that. And I got to boot camp, and my counselor was like, you are too smart to be scrubbing the floors looking at everybody else who has a job while you decide what you want to do. So an opportunity came up to get into the aviation field, and I did it, and went to school in Millington, Tennessee right before it closed, and then got stationed in Pensacola.
All right, well, that worked out pretty well.
Sure did.
So you've been doing a lot to help the veteran community since you've left the service. What was how did you feel that calling, or did it kind of happen by accident? How did you get so involved in supporting veterans?
I got out because of a unfortunate accident that left me legally blind in my right eye. And when I came home, there was very little communication between resources and myself. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that during the 6 months that I was looking for a job, I could have been drawing unemployment. Mm-hmm. Sure, I sat through the 3-day TAP class that everybody sits through.
Sure.
But none of it really is relevant, or you don't think it relates to you until you actually come home. Mm-hmm. You're just there tuning in and out, hoping that they sign the paper so you can get your papers and go home. Uh-huh. Now I wish, or I think to myself, if I knew then what I know now. So I decided that I was going to be a veteran advocate and be that link between the veteran when he comes home and the resources that are out there waiting for them.
That's really awesome. So how did you first do that, and how have you been doing that?
For 6 months, I struggled with finding who I was and what I wanted to do, because I got out unexpectedly. I got out 2 years out of my 4-year enlistment, and I came home with a little bit of shame because, you know, everybody's like, wow, that was quick. 4 years went by really fast. And I have to explain why I didn't really do 4 years. Well, why? And then it gets into this, well, I don't want to talk about what happened to me.
Sure.
I don't want to talk about it. So I always either avoided the question or I shifted the conversation back to that other person, because I felt as if, man, I got hurt and I didn't go anywhere and I didn't do anything. And I don't even want to tell people that I joined the service because I felt some sort of just self-shaming that I for 6 months, I just kind of like sat around figuring out, what do I do? What do I do? Where do I go from here? This is not what I was expecting. I was expecting to travel the world, and I was expecting to do this or do that. And at the same time, my great friends that were already in service and they were on ships, they would send me postcards from wherever they went. They would send me postcards and letters, and they meant well, but for me it hurt to receive that because I was like, that should have been me, or that could have been me. So I struggled with that transition because my service ended a lot sooner than I was expecting it to. I was left with a disability that I had to begin to cope with, and I wasn't really even sure where to go or how to do it. And for 6 months, half a year, I was just kind of like stuck. Fortunately, the organization that helped me through my disability process, AMVETS, was hiring. The service officer, the office manager called me and asked me if I was interested in the job. And at the time I said, okay, I don't know what that means, but I'll try it. 20 years later, I'm still a veterans advocate.
Still a veterans advocate. That's wonderful. I've talked to so many veterans that have a similar story, at least in the part where they thought they were going to do something different or something more, and there is a bit of that self-shaming, or they get shamed by other people who are the combat veteran that says, oh, you didn't really serve, or you're not a real veteran, and that is such crap.
Yeah.
And I want to know more about how you can help others maybe overcome some of those feelings and help stop that dialogue that if you weren't in a firefight and returning fire, that you're not a veteran, because that's certainly not the case.
Yeah, you're right about that. And I faced it more so with fellow sailors who said, oh, you were in the Navy, what ship did you serve on? Mm-hmm. I didn't serve on a ship, I served in Pisa. Oh, you're not really a sailor. Oh, I thought you said you joined the Navy. And I was kind of like, well, I mean, we all have five different fingers, and every one has its own responsibility and its own function. And that's how it is in the service. Not everybody can be G.I. Joe or G.I. Jane, but it takes everyone to help that person at the front line do their job. I recently met with an Air Force veteran who served during the Vietnam era in Korea in supplies. So if he hadn't done his job correctly, those guys in Vietnam wouldn't have the ammo that they needed. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't have the uniforms. They wouldn't have all the supplies that they needed.
Yeah,
so his service
without supply, the bullets don't fly.
Exactly,
like
right?
That. Yeah.
So, sometimes people tend to forget that everybody has a role, and every role is equally as responsible. Mm-hmm. Just as the guy who's working the kitchen, cooking our meals, as the guy who's going around cleaning our toilets. It takes everybody's service and dedication and commitment to make our armed forces the greatest in the world. Mm-hmm. And it's so sad that we tend to kind of shame each other on that sometimes. And I'm not talking about the back and forth with the branches of service, teasing the Marines and the chair force. This is really when you take it upon yourself to make somebody feel as if their service didn't matter as much as yours. So I spent a lot of years, and I still struggle with that to this day, because I didn't identify myself as a veteran, and I never took advantage of a lot of veteran opportunities, because in my mind, even though I was already working at the VA, already working with veterans, the majority of the veterans at the time that I was working with were the Vietnam veterans, and I thought a veteran was them, the combat vet, the guy who deployed, the guy who lost a limb, the guy who wore that funny hat, and that wasn't me. So I didn't identify myself as a veteran, much less as somebody entitled to those resources that these veterans, because I didn't do anything. I didn't go anywhere. And it's still a struggle that I have. And when I meet veterans that have that same struggle, I don't share my story very often, but I do with them, because it makes them realize that, what, girl, that's crazy. How could you feel that way? Well, look in the mirror, because that's exactly what you're telling me, just in different words.
I don't want to smack those people around that say those things, but in a way, I feel that the ones that are the most loud about, oh, that's not a real veteran, those are the ones that are still suffer the most with insecurity.
Yes.
Those are the ones that they have a real struggle with their self-image, and it's unfortunate. And I think a lot of what has happened is there are young men and women who join the service who had this, maybe they didn't like it at the time, but an amazing experience of, you know, coming together with their military family, and, you know, fighting in a war and these life-threatening situations, and now all of a sudden they come back to this veteran/civilian life, and there's this huge gap, and they feel like that was the highlight of their life, and they're trying to hang on to it as the best thing that ever happened to them, as opposed to using that experience as a launching pad for something even better. And whenever I hear people say those type of things, that's kind of what I kind of think of them as, man, I'd really love to help you find the next step in your life that is even more amazing than what you experienced in the military. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm being a little too harsh on some of those men and women.
It's funny that you just said that, because I just had an aha moment.
Oh yeah?
You just gave me this aha moment where I served because I was expecting to do these great things, and it defined me, but it actually became that launching pad for me to do these great things now. And I never really saw it that way until you just phrased it that way.
Well, that's why we chose you to be back in your Hall of Fame. It's not just a successful military experience or career. It's what are you doing now to make a difference in the lives of veterans and their family members, and you're killing it. You know, you're doing an amazing job. And the fact that you chose to serve, and the reasons why, I love that just that you were so, you know, thankful and grateful for a nation that had provided you with these opportunities, that you felt called to serve. We need more people like that, and it has, you know, you mentioned the 5 fingers, but it's not just because you signed up and said, hey, I want to go do this, doesn't mean that's what you're going to end up doing.
That's very true. And in this day and age, in this type of war environment, it doesn't matter what your rank, what your job is. Look at the first group of POWs that were captured in Iraq. One of them was a cook. Shashaya Johnson, she was from El Paso, I believe. She was a cook. We've got veterans like Earl Lundy, who was also a cook, and got blown up in the kitchen, and now he's like this great advocate for helping veterans get into their best health and fitness. So it doesn't even matter what your job is. You have the opportunity to impact the service and your environment, and then you can also have the job where you're an infantryman and never get on the front line. So it doesn't really even matter. It's just whatever God has planned for your life, that's where you're going to end up. And I think that a lot of us fail to realize that we don't have control over what happens to us. We can choose, raise our right hand, sign, but we don't have control over where we're going to end up, what we're going to do, or what type of impact it's going to have on our lives. And oftentimes we don't just realize that just simply by signing up, we've done more than 90% of the country. We're in an all-volunteer force. So just the fact that you had the courage and you have that commitment to raise your right arm and offer your life if necessary for your country, that right there makes you entitled to whatever benefit is out there. That right there makes you deserving of any praise. And a lot of us feel that way about everybody else but not ourselves, because we're our own worst enemy and we're our own worst critic. And I would always help veterans but couldn't help myself. And we find ourselves spending this time and energy getting these veterans to the resources, but when we really need it ourselves, we feel we're not worthy of it.
Man, that was really good. Have you ever felt that maybe your desire to help others, you just told me that you often didn't help yourself or didn't think those things of yourself, Do you think maybe, because I'm guilty of this, that you use helping other people maybe as a coping mechanism?
Yes.
Of avoidance even?
Yes. I really believe that. I'd had a conversation with a psychiatrist of mine who told me that she felt like I was martyring myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I never really thought of it that way. But looking back, I'm thinking, maybe she was right. Maybe I feel like I'm so self-sacrificing and so willing to say yes instead of taking care of myself first, that I lose focus on my own self-help. And after having done that for nearly 20 years, I ran myself to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
I ran myself to the ground, and I realized I've been pouring and pouring and pouring out, and nobody's been pouring into me, not even myself, that it got to the point where I went from going 100 miles an hour to complete stop, and I didn't know how to get out of that. And all the words and all the advice and all the resources that I'd given to so many other people just kind of sat there because I didn't even know where to start myself. So I sunk deeper and deeper into this hole that I created by not taking better care of myself and my own mental health issues.
Mm-hmm. I can completely relate. I struggle. You mentioned the infantryman who doesn't get on the front line, and I chose to be an infantryman. That's all I wanted to do. I want to be an airborne infantryman, and that's a fun story for another time. But that's what I wanted to do, and I did it. And then when I finally got my opportunity to get deployed to Iraq, they moved me into headquarters. Somebody found out that I could speak eloquently in front of the colonel and I could use a computer, and they felt that my, those talents and skills would be wasted being the infantry squad leader that I was, just the day prior. Now you need to work in this brigade headquarters. And
well, I'm surprised they didn't say, look how good looking he is. He should just be a model and be on posters.
Oh, that would have been even worse. I got to deploy, and I did get to go on some really cool missions while I was there, but the vast majority of the time I spent on the FOB. And that was really hard for me to know that the soldiers that I had been training right up to before that deployment, and the 6 years that I'd had in the military before that to prepare myself, as an airborne infantryman to be in combat and to be in firefights, and now I wasn't going to have that opportunity. I felt a lot of self-imposed, shame that I didn't really do enough. And thankfully, before the end of my deployment, I was able to, have some fun, so to speak, and enjoy the infantry experience a little bit. And thankfully, it wasn't too traumatizing or physically debilitating for me, unlike so many of our friends. But yeah, I carried a lot of that for a long time, that I'm not worthy of those things, of that disability rating, or the other person has it so much worse than I do. How could I take some of these benefits that are out there when people need it more, that have been through so much more than I hear it all the time.
Yeah,
that's not unique to either one of us.
You know what, I think that the misconception in the community, especially with the older generation, the veterans, is that this is welfare. Oh, I don't need it. I have a good job and I have good health benefits. And this is not welfare. Welfare is given to anybody who is below a certain or fits a certain criteria. Mm-hmm. The criteria required for these benefits is that you served. And everybody who served has sacrificed some part of their body for this service. Mm-hmm. If you were to work at in regular corporate America and you injured your knee on the job, workers' comp covers you. There's no workers' comp in the service. That's what this VA compensation is for. Everybody has sacrificed in some way or another, mm-hmm. some form, either physically, mentally, a part of their body for their service. And that's what this compensation is. So that's the first thing I try to explain to vets. And explaining it in that way makes them realize, okay, I guess you're right. So it's not welfare. No. And even if it was, if you need it. And so with these disability claims, I think that veterans just don't want to be labeled as disabled because we have this mindset of, well, what are you disabled? I don't see anything wrong with you. The majority of our disabilities are not seen. Looking at me, you can tell that I'm legally blind in my right eye.
I had no idea. I've known you for a couple of years.
It's not something that I talk about because I don't want, and it sounds bad, but then people make fun of it. Hey, how you doing today? Aye, pirate. Or, like people can be so insensitive about and when you're teasing each other as vets, because we kind of do it and it sounds bad, but I've seen veterans who are severely burnt call each other crispy critters, and we all just kind of like have a way of this black humor of coping with things. Veterans can do that with each other, but then when somebody else does it, it's like you're ready to smack them. Because no, I can tease them that for being a Marine because I was in the Navy, and I can tease him about not having an eye because I don't have an eye, but when somebody else does it, then it's kind of like, wait, no. Yeah. And I think that sometimes in the civilian side of it, the civilians have their perception of what they think war is, or what a veteran is, or what an infantryman is, or what's going on in Iraq or Afghanistan, or what happened in Vietnam. So their first instinct is, did you kill anybody? Did you? And for that person that's already shaming themselves that they didn't do enough, it just kind of like, it's that nail on that coffin. You see, even this guy's telling me I didn't do enough. So it's, I think it's just the dialogue that we have to have about being a little bit more mindful and sensitive in the way we talk to each other, and explain that it's okay to be disabled. It's okay to, whether it's physically or mentally, it's okay to not be okay. Get the help for it. Yeah. Get the resources to get yourself to be okay. But don't suffer in silence.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute then. Let's talk about the stigma surrounding mental health and I could talk about that all day long. Just if I've seen memes and stuff that show people who are severely overweight working out, and it has something motivational like, you're passing everybody that's on the couch. It's like, it doesn't matter, where you start, it's how you finish. And there's all these things. So we can see anybody at any level of physical fitness, and we can be, right on. We can help support them for trying to get themselves healthier. Unfortunately, there's still a population of society that will shame them no matter what. And that's horrible, and I hate that. But on the positive side, we can be encouraging for someone that's taking control of how they're going to eat and the way that they exercise. Why can't we have that same attitude towards people for sharpening their mental health in a way that, because using that same analogy with the physical fitness, whether someone is out of shape and trying to get to where they can run their first 5K, or whether you're somebody who's already a world-class or Olympian athlete, that person can still work out, right? And those are two different spectrums. Why do we wait until we're the equivalent of mentally obese or on diabetes before we seek out any help? That's what I think this library is for, is we can continue to, regardless of where we are on that spectrum of mental health, we can continue to learn and to grow and to get even better.
I am a poster child for that. Because I have just about every resource at my fingertips. Being in the community, being known, being as active as I am, it's all at my fingertips. And I connected everybody to each other except myself. And in the span of weeks, it felt like I went from running a 20-page newspaper by myself to not being able to get out of bed, to not being able to shower, to not be able to, I just was so tired all the time, drained, and I didn't know why. And when I talked to the therapist about it, she says, well, why didn't you call the VA crisis hotline? And my response was, I wasn't suicidal. And she looks at me and she says, read it out loud. It's not the VA suicide hotline. It's the VA crisis hotline. And for me, that was like, I didn't think of it that way because I just thought suicide. Okay, if I'm suicidal, then I gotta go get help. And
like, let's not let it get that bad.
Exactly, that's what she says. She's like, it's a crisis hotline. You don't wait till you're suicidal to call us. Why did you call us before? And for me, that was kind of like another aha moment. It's like, well, what is a crisis? Because I have a very high tolerance. Naturally, I have a high tolerance for pain, for stress, and I don't realize that, okay, my body's in a crisis. And even though I was starting to experience physical signs, I didn't link the two together. You know, I was feeling the lump in my throat. I was feeling the tiredness, the lack of motivation, and I just thought I needed more sleep. And I kept thinking, it'll be all right. I'll be better tomorrow. I'll be better tomorrow. But the longer I dragged on without getting any help, the deeper I was sinking into it until I was at that suicidal point where it's like, what the hell is wrong with me? And how did I get to this point? I didn't even recognize myself in the mirror anymore. And that's a very scary, scary place to be because you don't want to tell anybody that you're having these thoughts because you're afraid of what they're going to think and how are they going to see me and what are they going to do? Are they going to lock me up? And then am I going to be able to keep my concealed handgun? Am I going to lose my children? Am I going to lose my job? So you just kind of like isolate yourself even more, which is like the worst thing you can do. And having lived it myself, I can tell you that for the first time in my whole career, I personally related to that suicidal veteran and that crisis mode. And I never, ever would have expected myself to be in that situation. Never. I thought I had it all because I'm the one that has always had it put together. I'm always the one that shows up smiling. I'm always the one who shows up and helps everybody else, and I couldn't help myself. And that was a very scary place to be.
I've told the story before in a big speech about the veteran who falls into the well, didn't expect himself to be there, and it's the person after person keeps coming by and gives them advice, but nobody really knows how to help get him out of that well. And then eventually that veteran comes along, and the soldier says, I'm stuck, I can't get out, can you help me? And the veteran jumps down in the well with the soldier, and he says, what are you doing? Why'd you do? Now we're both stuck down here. And that veteran says, no, we're not stuck. I've been down here before, and I know how to get us out. And we're going to crawl out of here together. And I love that. But the thing that makes that story work is the veteran had been down there before.
That's right.
You know what it's like. And not to say that people who haven't experienced trauma or been in the military that they can't add value, that they can't help. They absolutely can. But when we're in that really deep, dark place, to know that there's another service member, another veteran, regardless of branch, regardless of how much time you were there, that you've been in that dark place before and you had somebody to help you, get out of there. Now you can go back and help others.
That's true.
And
that's very true. And what people don't realize is that sometimes when you have these mental health crises, one of the symptoms is impulsiveness. You're not looking into the future. Maybe the future looks so bleak that you just make these decisions that hurt you in the short term or even in the long term. And then that decision leads to another bad decision and another bad decision. And next thing you know, you're deeper into this hole. And people are there to just judge you. Well, it's his fault because he did this or she did that. And if he hadn't done this, and it's like, well, forget what the action was. Let's go back to what the root was. Sometimes we just want to feel alive. We want to feel something because we've felt empty for so long that if an opportunity comes around or just something comes around, we're going to act on it because, wow, I feel alive. But it's not the best behavior for us.
Wow, destructive.
Drinking, oh man, that downing that six-pack felt so good, but it's not good for you. And then you just continue to do it. Well, of course, look at him, he's an alcoholic. Well, what led him to that? Maybe he did that because he wanted to forget. And maybe people who do the opposite, they do things because they need to feel alive. and they become these daredevils and get hurt or whatever it is. And
I'm certainly not a therapist, but I have an opinion on this, and it goes back to our, as a society, it's not a veteran problem, but our lack of healthy coping skills.
Yes.
And I've used the analogy before. I just talked a minute ago about physical fitness, so I'll stick with that. If you and I were power lifters and we were working on trying to get our max for the squat, and we got to some number where, man, we keep growing, we keep getting better, we keep making the squat, and we make the lift, it's a good lift, and then all of a sudden we reach a weight that we can't get, that we get down and we're like, we can't, and we got to drop the weight and we got to stand up. Like, you failed that lift. Mm-hmm. Now you know what you can handle, so to speak, if you see where I'm going with this.
Yes.
Now you know how much weight you can lift, and that is your max. Any weight that is put on the bar that's less than that, you can handle that. That's just like the problems in our life. We have a certain threshold of what we can lift, what we can handle, what we can bear, and all of a sudden when somebody puts more weight than we can lift, we can't make it, we got to drop. Mm-hmm. But we don't have to stop there. If you hit that, 300-pound mark and you're like, oh great, and you're working for 350, but you can't get 350, are you just going to stop? If you're competitive and you're like, man, I want to be able to lift that, what do you have to do? There are other things, aside from squats, you can do, leg curls, leg presses, calf raises, lunges, all of these things to strengthen your muscles to where you can eventually get that lift. And that idea is those leg curls, those leg raises, all those things, those are these books that we read. They're the friends that we make, the stories that we tell, the therapies that we go to help make us stronger to be able to handle that heavier weight. And so what it sounds to me, whenever we hit crisis, all we did is we thought we were strong, but somebody finally put enough weight on our life that, whoa, that was too much for me, and we think we're done.
Yes.
But we don't have to be done. We can become even stronger and be able to lift that.
The root of that, in my opinion, is identifying who you are and knowing who you are and believing in who you are. Because if I don't know myself well enough, and I can tell you that was my problem, I didn't know how much I can lift. Mm-hmm. Because I have this image of who I should be. And that didn't reconcile
you were shitting all over
with
yourself.
Who I really was. And without reading books like this, without the therapy, people think, well, why should I go to therapy? I don't need it. Well, do you really know who you are? Because if you don't know who you really are, you don't know what you can actually handle. You don't know if you're really cut out to carry that weight that's been put on you. Mm-hmm. And my problem was that I had this image and this expectation of myself, but the reality was that I wasn't as strong as I thought I was. Mm-hmm. So when I broke because I let myself down. Not only did I let all these people down, but I let myself down, and I beat myself up about it. And I still do that sometimes, and I have to kind of just snap out of it. What has also helped me is reconnecting with my faith. And I went to church last night, and the pastor, ironically, sometimes you feel like, okay, God, was that for me? Because there's just too much of an irony here. The whole sermon was on General George Patton's quote that says, I am a soldier, I fight where I'm told, and I win where I fight. So the first one is identifying who you are. He knew exactly who he was. Mm-hmm. I'm a soldier. The second one is, I fight where I'm told, where sometimes we have to submit to an authority. Mm-hmm. We are not the authority. We are not the decision makers and everything. We're not. And sometimes our body is the authority, where your body is telling you, okay, I get it. You're this soldier, but this is a fight that you shouldn't be fighting in. This is a battleground that you're not really an expert in. This is a situation that you're not familiar with. So you have to listen to that authority as to what your battles should be. Mm-hmm. And then be determined that you're going to win that battle. Okay, I'm told to fight here, but I'm not going to let this battle win. I'm going to win. And that quote spoke volumes to me, because That's where I was suffering. Who am I? I'm fighting all these battles that aren't even mine. Why am I even in this battlefield? This is all unfamiliar territory to me. And because of that, I'm not going to win. I'm such a loser because I lost this battle and I lost that battle. Well, I was fighting battles that I shouldn't have been fighting in the first place. And so that quote there really was like a eye-opener for me. And I was like, okay, so first I need to identify who I am and then submit myself to whatever battles I should be fighting and stay away from the ones that I shouldn't and make sure that I win in the ones that I'm fighting.
That's awesome.
Church.
You know, I can totally relate. There's been times I'm like, all right, I get the point. All right, thanks, Pastor.
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
How you talking to me?
Like,
okay, hey, there's a lot in here.
Okay, God, I'll see you next Wednesday. I'll be back. And, you know, whatever it takes. I know there's different faiths and different spiritualities and different forms of meditation, whatever it takes. What works for me might not work for you, but find something that does. It goes back to who are you and what's going to work for you, because we're all so different from each other. And even ourselves, what worked for me 2 years ago might not work for me now and might not work for me in another 2 years. So we're constantly evolving, we're constantly changing, and we have to learn to identify the triggers, identify our strengths, identify the battles that we shouldn't be fighting, and ultimately, though, be determined to win. Don't let it kill you. And I remember the day that I finally got out of bed and I said, I'm not going to let this kill me. I'm not going to let it kill me. I'm not. There are way too many veterans that have already killed themselves so that I don't have to. And I couldn't help them. But if I can help one veteran, it's going to be me. It's going to be me. And I just hope that my story will let people understand that it doesn't matter what the title behind your name is. It doesn't matter how high of a mountain you've ever climbed. If you ever start to slip, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to say, I'm not okay, and take a step back. Because once you get to the point of reaching the bottom of that well, it is hard to find that one vet that's going to go down and sit with you. So don't wait to get down there. Or if you're on the other end, you see a veteran that's in that bottom of that well, go down there and sit with them. I don't always have the right words to say, but sometimes just simply a hug, a shoulder to cry on, just listening helps. And
yeah, that's really good stuff. I
spent my whole life thinking that I'm a strong person, I'm independent, I'm not gonna cry. And I lived almost 40 years of my life not crying. I didn't cry. And the last 2 years, I haven't stopped crying. And I had to learn, it's okay to cry, Luz. It's okay. So now I cry all the time. And that was a big thing for me. Maybe if I'd learned that it was okay to have that form of release, I would have bottled up 40 years of pain and suffering and, resentment and anger and everything I was feeling. And now I just cry and then I'm over it and I'm good to go.
One of the best things about being a dad is I get to watch cartoons. And I love the cartoon movies. I was just thinking about Inside Out whenever you were sharing that, and how this young girl has these feelings and these emotions in her head, and there's joy and sadness and anger and disgust and fear, I think were the ones that they use. And joy was in charge, and she thought the goal was to make every day a good day. You got to be happy and everything's going to be good. And then have you seen the movie?
Yeah.
And then with sadness is like, I'm trying to help. It's like, no, we can't be sad. Sad's not good. Yes. And then you realize at the end that sadness is so important of an emotion for us to have, to help us work through those things. And I loved how the memories became, multicolored with the joy and the sadness, like this really sad experience, of her losing the game, then turned into a joyous experience of her friends and her family loving on it. And I love that. So when you talked about, being sad and
we're
crying,
humans,
we need
and
it.
we were created with all these emotions for a reason, and they're all very natural emotions, and we have to just give ourselves the okay to feel them.
Well, there's definitely what we call manufactured feelings. One of the therapies I went to, they talked about there's the natural emotions and then there's the manufactured ones. So when you take the natural emotion of sadness or fear or anger, those are natural, but whenever you add on to them your own dialogue about meaning that you apply to an experience, that's where you get things like shame. That's not a natural emotion. That is a combination of either fear or anger or sadness tied with some meaning that you've applied to it to make it a manufactured feeling or emotion. But, that's the type of stuff that I learned in these books, and I wish more people would dig into them because it's really powerful stuff.
Even the perfect man, the man who never sinned, Jesus, he felt emotion. The Bible talks about how he would get angry, how he would feel sad, how he went through all these natural emotions that we all go through, and it's okay to feel that way. But then the Bible says, do not sin in your anger. So it doesn't say, don't get mad. It's a sin to get mad. Just don't sin when you're mad. And I think that sometimes if I'm angry, then I'm so mad, I'm gonna go and drink myself to sleep tonight because I'm so mad, and that's how I'm gonna handle that. Well, here I just created a manufactured emotion because then I wake up feeling shamed. Oh my God, why do I do that to myself? I feel horrible today, and you see, you're a loser, and you start feeling all this shame or whatever feelings, and it's all because of the action that we took when we were feeling that, instead of just accepting that it's okay to feel whatever we're feeling. Take a breather, meditate, pray, close your eyes, take a nap, whatever it is that you've got to do to get out of that feeling. Don't stay there. And don't act on the feeling. Just feel it and then get yourself out of it.
That's good. Well, I am very excited to hear your speech at our gala this year. Have you decided what you're going to talk about? You got it kind of narrowed down? I know it's going to be a big deal.
I'll surprise you.
All right, good. Well, this has been an amazing experience. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you for coming in and sharing it with our audience. For those of you out there, you can find Luz on social media. You can connect through Impact to Hero. You can see some of the great things that she's doing here in our Houston community. And like Luz and like myself, I hope you will choose growth. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.